directions are to factor. Okay, so we've already looked at some videos where we factored the greatest common factor and difference of squares. Okay, we're still always looking out for those. What we're going to look mostly at this video is what's called quadratic trinomials. Okay, that trinomial is three terms. There's an x squared term, an x term, and a number term. Like if you look at number 2, x squared plus 2x minus 35, that's a quadratic trinomial. Okay, we're going to see how those factor. But before we start, let's recall what we did previously when we multiplied. Okay, so I just want to look at this example right here. X plus 3 times x plus 5. What happens when we multiply that? Well, hopefully you remember, you FOIL, right? You go x times x, that's x squared. And then you go x times 5, that's the O in FOIL, 5x. X times 3, 3 times x, 3x. And then the last term, 3 times 5, which of course is 15. And then what do? We combine like terms to get our answer. X squared plus 8x plus 15. Okay, remember that? Good. Now, that's called multiplying, right? FOIL is an acronym for that type of multiplication. So when we go that direction, when we go from here to here, that's called multiplying, right? So what we're going to do is go backwards. We're going to be given this is a quadratic trinomial. Alright, we're going to go this way, and we're going to want to end up with x plus 3 times x plus 5. That's the opposite of FOILing. And that's another way, another method of factoring. Okay? And that's what we're going to learn how to do in this video. So let's try and make some connections between the two. What does this quadratic trinomial have to do with that product of these two linear binomials? Well, x squared plus 8x plus 15, you'll notice something about the plus 5 and the plus 3. They multiply together to give you the 15 right here, and if you add them together, you get 8. Right? And that shouldn't be a surprise, because if I were to multiply these out, that's what happens. You end up adding 5x and 3x to get 8x, and when you multiply, you get 15. Okay? So that's what we're looking for. So let's look at this first example. So if this factors, and not all of them factor, by the way, some of them don't factor, and we'll see an example like that. But if this factors, what we need is two numbers that multiply together to give you 8 and add together to give you 6. Right? And if it works out like the last one, which it should, if I do the opposite of FOIL, I need x and x. That would give me this x squared. And then right here, I just need two numbers that multiply together to give me 8 and add together to give me 6. Well, that should be 4 and 2. Remember, the only numbers that multiply together to give you positive 8 would be 4 and 2, 8 and 1. Both positive or both negative. Okay? And those two numbers, 4 and 2, add together to give you 6. And that's it. That's all I got to do. You can always check your answer. Think about the check. X times x, x squared. X times 2, 2x. 4 times x, 4x. Add those, you get 6x. And then 4 times 2 would give you 8. Okay? We can always do the check. Let's do that real quick. Okay, remember, this is my answer. This is my answer right here. X plus 4 times x plus 2. But let's do the check real quick. FOIL it out. X times x is x squared. X times 2 is 2x. 4 times x is 4x. And then 4 times 2 is 8. Right? That's what we did that's what we did previously. And I can see it, if I add 2x and 4x, I'm going to get 6x, so I know that I've done it right. Okay? So I can do the check, every one of these. If you want to check for your factoring, just multiply. And I know that this is the correct answer. So I'm going to circle that just to make sure you know that's the right answer. That's the answer right there. Okay? Let's do it again. Number 2. X squared plus 2x minus 35. Again, if this factors, I know it's going to be x times x to give me the x squared. And again, I just need two numbers that multiply together to give me negative 35 and add together to give me 2. Okay? So those two numbers, whatever they are, same two numbers, when I multiply them, I get negative 35. You can do this if you need to write a little notes for yourself. If I add them together, I get positive 2. And they have to be the same two numbers, right? The same two numbers go here and here as they go here and here. Okay, so if you think about all your factors of 35, what do you got? 35 and 1? 7 and 5. Right? So it's got to somehow be 7 and 5, so I'm going to write that down. And now when I multiply these, I need to get a negative 35, and when I add them, I have to get a positive 2. That means that 5's got to be negative, right? 7 times negative 5, negative 35. 7 plus negative 5, positive 2. So that's going to be plus 7 minus 5, and I'm done. Okay, remember, we can check that. I'm going to skip the check, go ahead and FOIL that out. You should get this original problem. Alright, moving on, number 3. Two numbers that multiply together to give me negative 12. Okay, by the way, I forgot to mention, we still should be checking greatest common factor. I should look at all these for a common factor. There's no common factor here, right? The first two have an x in it, but the last one doesn't. So there's no common factor. And there's no number that goes into, there's a 1 here, right? 1, 4, and negative 12 other than 1. So there's no common factor, but we should still be looking for that. Because on the test, they'll just be all mixed up, all the three types, the common factor, difference of squares, and these trinomials, they'll all be mixed together. So you have to decide what to do. Okay? So we recognize this has no common factor. We recognize it's not the difference of squares because there's 3 terms. So then we recognize it's a trinomial, quadratic trinomial, x squared, x, and a number. So what we do is we try and find two numbers that multiply together to give me negative 12. And when I add them together, I get negative 4. Okay, so a couple more factors for 12 this time. Think about it. You got 12 and 1, 6 and 2, 3 and 4. How are you going to get a 4 out of there? You're going to have to pick the 6 and 2. Okay, 12 and 1 is not going to get you to 4 anywhere, and 3 and 4 also isn't. So 6 and 2, now you got to think, all right, which one of these has to be negative? In this case, the 12 is negative. So I got to multiply a negative by a positive to get a negative. So you got to decide which one's negative. It's going to have to be the 6. Negative 6 times 12. Negative 6 times 2 is negative 12. But negative 6 plus 2 is negative 4. Right? If I let the 2 be negative, it's not going to work. So it's got to be negative 6, positive 2. Again, we can check the answer. If we FOIL that out, we get negative 6x plus 2x for the O and I in FOIL gives us minus 4x. Okay? So there's my answer. X minus 6 times x plus 2. Alright, one more. X squared minus 17x plus 72. So that one looks a little bit harder. My two numbers, when I multiply them, have to be positive 72. And when I add them, they have to be negative 17. How does that happen? Well, the only way that can happen, if you think about it, is both numbers would have to be negative, right? Because how do you multiply two numbers to get a positive and add two numbers to get a negative? There's only one way to do that. They'd have to both be negative. Okay, so now that we know that, we got to look at the factors of 72. What multiplies together to give you 72? Well, you can write these down if you want. I'm kind of out of room here. Let me go ahead and draw a little box. Give me some space. What multiplies together to give you 72? You can do this if you want. Just list them. Right? You got 72 times 1. That's not going to work. You got 36 times 2. That's not going to work. Right? But remember, both of these would have to be negative to get to positive 72. What else? Does 4 go into 72? 4 goes into 72. Okay. 4 times what gives you 72? Should be 18. Okay, and that's getting me closer to negative 17 if I make both of those negative. Alright, they're both going to have to be negative. That's negative 22, so that's not going to work. So keep going, and there's another pair of numbers that gives you 72. 9 times 8. Right, so think about those. Negative 9 times negative 8 is positive 72. And if I add those two numbers, I get negative 17. Okay, so it looks like we found the two numbers. This one took a little more work. We had to look at more factors of 72 until we found it. But once I recognize that factorization, I can write my answer. Doesn't matter what order you put those in. X minus 9 times x minus 8, or x minus 8 times x minus 9. That's my answer. Okay, again, we can check that to make sure. Alright, so that's the end of this video. We're going to do a couple more examples.